Please welcome our superhero sponsor, MetaViewer by MetaFile, and their super regional manager, Doug Bertram. Today, he will be saving the day with his session, Process Automation, exploring the benefits of RPA in your workplace. Stick around after Doug's session for a live Q&A with a real-life BC superhero.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Doug Bertram. Thanks to DynamicsCon for getting us all together today. I'm with a company called MetaFile. We're going to be sharing some thoughts today on enabling efficiencies, AP automation from invoice to payment. Kind of go through a few slides here, and if we get a little bit of time, kind of show you a real-world example of what we're talking about in the slides. Today's presentation, you can ask questions in the chat functionality. At the end of the presentation, we'll try and read some of those questions and answer them. I should have somebody monitoring that chat function if you have any issues going on through the presentation as well. So with that, we will jump right in and kind of get started here. So as I said, my name is Doug Bertram. I'm with a company called MetaFile. Today we're going to share with you our experiences in enabling efficiencies for organizations, AP automation from invoice to payment. Today's track is the Microsoft Dynamics BC, so I assume a lot of you folks have Dynamics BC, which is what brought you to the meeting today. We'll talk a little bit specifically about that. We are integrated with all the versions of Dynamics, but we're going to kind of talk mostly on that. Right, so today's presentation, we're going to talk about the efficiencies from automating AP from invoice to payments. We're going to really kind of address it in three primary areas. Automation, invoice processing automation is an overview as a whole. We're going to talk a little bit about the differences between on-premises and cloud implementations when it comes to automation. And then we'll kind of wrap up with some payment automation as well, being able to automate the paying of your suppliers and those types of things as well. All right, so really the benefits of automation really kind of are lots of different facets as to how that can really enhance your businesses, really enhancing your investment in Business Central, enabling your remote workforce, streamlining your processes, eliminating manual data entry and touching of documents, and then give you some tools to evaluate your spending and with some reporting tools. We'll talk about all aspects of that from an automation perspective. So really, to begin with, enhancing your D365 Business Central investment. It's depends on how long you guys have been on Business Central, but it's a very powerful tool. And what we find with clients is that being able to offer an invoice processing solution outside of your D365 can really enhance that tool and allow you to really leverage and maximize what that tool is good for, but enhance it with some other capabilities of extracting that data to routing it around automatically, but really tightly integrating with that Microsoft Dynamics BC product can really help you in your business processes. And one of the nice things of keeping that out as you upgrade your Business Central environment, or maybe someday, heaven forbid, you migrate to something else, it really protects your investment by having that in its own, all your workflows and all those types of things in a third-party tool. Second aspect of automation is really enabling that remote workforce. And historically, this has been a lot. We work with a lot of clients that have different locations that they had to manage the flow of paper through those processes, and pushing paper from one location to another is awfully difficult. Obviously, last year with COVID, pretty much every organization was thrust into this, whether they had multiple physical locations or not, as we all started to work from home. And we found our clients that had a solution. We're grateful that they did. Those that did not had to pull the trigger real quick, and then we helped to get them up and running to enable the remote workforce that they were kind of thrown into with the whole COVID. So it really helped them be more efficient and really be able to move that paper around from person to person in a timely fashion to still get things out the door as quickly as possible, but to do so in a real secure environment as well. third aspect of streamlining your invoice processes is really is just that streamlining. You can see here's some metrics from Ardent Partners. They're an organization that does a lot of surveys with AP environments around the country, around the world. And they kind of have really, we've kind of partnered with them over the years, and we've seen a lot of their studies and research their studies as to what do best-in-class organizations really experience when bringing automation in the organization. And so that those faster processing times, lower exception rates, lowering the cost of processing invoices. And what we find in working with our clients is that they've done their same business processes for years, right? So a lot of times, you ask them, so why do you do that as part of your business process? And well, I don't know, because we've been doing that for years. And what they come to find out is over time, maybe your business processes do need to be looked at once in a while, because originally when they were first introduced, it's kind of like the whole childhood game of the telephone game, where you have people that kind of come and go over the years, and Sally tells Joe, and Joe tells Sam, and so on. And eventually today, you're maybe not, your business processes aren't the way that they were intended. And automating that with a solution like MetaViewer to bring that invoice processing and automation into the picture really helps standardize that and make sure that everybody's adhering to the processes the way that they were intended and the way they're designed. And because it's programmed into the system, that all kind of takes care of itself. And then you can kind of also gain from those efficiencies of touchless and manual data entry, which brings us to our next topic. An automation system really brings the advantages of really eliminating a lot of the mundane manual processing kinds of things that your users have to do. So the system it really begins by intelligently reading and extracting the data out of those documents, so that data can be identified and actually eliminate the data entry in the automation solution, as well as your D365 BC solution as well. So you really gain from those. And then the automation systems can have some intelligence built into them. So once they extract that data, they can analyze that data, compare that data to your Microsoft Dynamics BC solution. If everything's a perfect match, or pulling things, information back from the purchase order information, the vendor records, kind of validating some of that information, and do all those things automatically. And if everything is a nice perfect match, people don't have to touch it at all. It can go right in, and you can schedule the payment of those invoices, as you see fit. And so you don't have to worry about a lot of the mundane challenges of entering that information and comparing data and those types of things. So ultimately, spend management is another big area. So an automation solution, we talked about before how it can automate your business processes, and you can actually have those programmed in so that everybody follows those processes automatically. The other big advantage of automation is that it's logging all the information and all from those documents, all the things that people are doing when doing those documents, who approved it, who coded it, what kind of data, the data analysis that the system did to compare it to your Microsoft Dynamics BC solution. All of that information is logged into SQL. And so now your AP team, who doesn't have to do all that manual data entry and those types of things, can spend their time on better value add types of things. So analyzing the data that these systems are tracking and being able to see that data, and maybe work with your vendors to streamline processes even more. Maybe negotiate better discounts or better payment terms or things like that. And so you can really become really more of a value add to the organization as well. And it's interesting. So like Ardent Partners, they also do some metrics on that. And over the years, as they have been studying these AP organizations, these best-in-class organizations that implement AP automation, their AP team and the value that AP brings to the organization has really risen over time, and that's good to see. There was we've been in part of these studies for many years, and I can probably remember quite a while ago where the value of AP was not overly great, and today a lot more weight has been been given to the AP organizations, and they are seen as bringing values. And that's where these best-in-class organizations have really benefited by being able to do that spend management and understand the data that the automation solution brings. So those are kind of the benefits of automation as a whole, kind of looking at it at a bunch of different facets. One of the things that has been considered over the years and where we've seen things evolve is from on-premises implementations to cloud-based implementations. Now, those of you who are on the phone or on the webinar today who are in Microsoft Dynamics BC, obviously BC is a cloud implementation. And I think, so you guys have already seen some of the benefits of being in the cloud. From an automation perspective, historically, as a company, we used to do a lot of on-premises implementations. That's what people seem to prefer, where we would install the automation solution on their servers and have it integrated with their financial systems, and achieving all those benefits. Last year, probably I say over the last few years here, we've really seen that tide shift from companies looking for on-premises solutions to cloud automation solutions because of the same benefits that you guys see in having Microsoft Dynamics BC. Last year, I would say almost every single one of my implementations was a cloud-based implementation. And really, the value there is you're not in the business of managing hardware and software and having to update that and keep it backed up and updated and everything else. Whereas a cloud-based implementation of the automation does exactly all of that. It kind of manages the environment, makes sure that everything stays up to date. It's available. If we have a crisis like COVID where people have to leave the organization and they have to work from home, it can be accessed from wherever those people turn out to be. And ultimately, once you get back in the office, you can still use that same cloud automation to be able to participate in those workflows, do the kinds of things that you need to do to make things run through your organization efficiently. Payment automation, that's kind of another expansion of the whole end-to-end kind of solution from invoice to payment. To be able to automate that as well, we have some relationships with some organizations that add this into the mix for us. And what that does is you can submit your payments as a whole through a simple click. Submit your stream of payments to organizations that can then make sure that all your suppliers get paid in a timely manner. And they manage the relationship with those vendors from a payment perspective. So they can distribute, if they've got relationships with certain vendors, to accept virtual cards or credit cards through your regular bank. They'll pay through your regular bank accounts or ACH, and they kind of facilitate all of those payments. And so you don't really have to dig into that too much. You can kind of work with these organizations, and kind of some of the nice things that they do. They've got national supplier networks that they've negotiated with some of these suppliers, and a lot of them are probably suppliers that you already do business with. When they start accepting credit cards and things like that, there's some certain fees and advantages that like rebates and credits that you will get back that not only can pay for the payment automation side of this, but also can pay for your AP automation. So it kind of almost makes it pay for itself. So that's where your AP department can add more value to the organization, because there is a revenue stream that can come in that also supports the business processes of paying the invoices. All right, so I think that's kind of mostly the PowerPoint side of things. Now we're going to jump over to a product, a real world kind of scenario, and I'll kind of back up some of the things that we've already talked about in the first part of the presentation here. So now that we jumped over to the virtual machine here, kind of show you the real world example of automation. Automation is a little bit difficult to show, because if it's truly working like it should, there wouldn't be anything to show you. So for the sake of examples today and kind of walking you through, I've stopped a few things in the automation to kind of show you and reflect on what really would happen to a document. And then I'll be able to show some audit trails and kind of walk you through. So all the different bullet points that we talked about in the PowerPoint, I'm going to kind of cover with a real world scenario here. So really to kind of begin with is kind of really eliminating that manual data entry and being able to capture the documents and start extracting the data. Well, if you think about AP invoices, everything's so very different. Every vendor has their own formats and those types of things. So an automation solution actually can deal with that, though, because it can actually read the documents pretty much like a human can. And so you can see here, I got some documents to stop in this extraction tool here. You can see up in the left-hand corner, we've got some content identification. So what it did there is it read all the words that are in this document and compare that to your vendor records to try and see if there were any matches, in this case, some of the address information. And it did find some values that match. And so that's where those content identifiers kind of allow the system to know what vendor are we dealing with here, what company, what vendor. And so then extracting the data that's important out of this document is the information on the left. And vendor invoices are going to be very different. I'm not going to be able to say, look in this place, or have a system, look in a particular place. What it does is it reads an invoice. So there's a fairly comprehensive library that starts looking for words like a human would. So in this case, you can see here, highlighted in green, it found the words invoice pound. Because it found it, it grabbed that 45829, copied it, threw it back in for the invoice number field. And so if I tab through these, you can see there it would find the date, PO number, it found that and grabbed the value there. And if I scroll down here, tax, shipping and shipping and handling, it found that, and then found the total due as well. So that's how the system is designed to intelligently match up to your vendor card, to extract the data, and making sure that we can pull that information out of the invoice. So if I release that into the process, and so we're going to stop this tool, because this tool, I'm not going to keep going through that. We're not going to go there. If I go over to my browser and I look in, so here's where an automation solution that is browser-based lends itself nicely to hosted or on-premises. So if I'm working from my home office, or I'm at a different location, we have multiple locations around the organization, I can actually log in to the system. And I'm taken to my home page here, and this can kind of really be my dashboard of everything that I'm authorized to see and do in my system. You can kind of see here things with the numbers. Those would be my my work queues that allow me to see the things that I'm allowed to do. And when they change from a 0 to 1 or a 14, there's probably something in there that needs my attention, and I can go into there and refresh this and see if we can kind of update some of these numbers here as we get some different things that come in. All right, so in this waiting for payment, I'm going to click on that queue there, and we go in. So the purpose of this queue is once we push things over to Microsoft Dynamics BC, they sit in this queue and then pull that payment information back once you apply that over there. But you can see here up on top, we have this Waterworks invoice. That's the one that we were just looking at there with the purchase order. So when that invoice came in, here's where that automation came into play. So that first tool that I showed you there that extracted the data out of the document took that data and started comparing that to your BC system. So if I look at this document over here and then look over to the right here, you can see all these different rules, and this is where that touchless processing comes into play, where it takes that purchase order. In this case, it took that purchase order number, made sure that we had all the right information was extracted, talked to Dynamics, and used that purchase order number to compare that to what's available to match to. Depending on whether you do a two-way or a three-way match, it can look for receipts. It can look for what's still open against that purchase order. In this particular case, it found this product receipt to match to. Everything was a perfect match. Nobody had to touch it. It extracted the data and then delivered that transaction up to Microsoft Dynamics to be ready for payment. And so you can just post the transaction and then schedule the payment through either a payment automation company or directly yourself. The other way, and when it's not related to purchase order, let's hop over to this AP preparation queue here. There we go. So I've got some PO invoices down here as well. So those would be things that maybe failed that validation. So you can have a workflow that kind of allows you to integrate with your Microsoft Dynamics BC system to see why it didn't match and make the corrections and then push those over. So you do have tools to help automate those as much as possible if they are not a perfect match. But something that's, let's say, something that's not related to purchase order. There really isn't anything in your Microsoft Dynamics BC system to compare it to know that you were actually even expecting this invoice. So where that automation comes into play is to load that document and be able to you see the information of who the company is, what vendor it belongs to, and those types of things. And then when I click the code and reconcile, what the system can do is communicate to other sources to try and code this invoice automatically. So I don't have to manually code this invoice. And where the system can program to get that information, Microsoft Dynamics BC, you can specify what are the default codes for that particular vendor, or you can the system actually can look at its own self and say, hey, okay, for this company, this vendor, or different parameters on that document, how was it coded last time? And try to automatically code that invoice as you see here. So as you can see, I click that coded button and it communicates with the system to automatically code this invoice. And I could accept the coding, the default coding. I could add additional coding or even change some of the coding that's in here. And I can do so by interacting with the chart of accounts. If I start typing a few characters, it can communicate either by account number or I can actually search by description of those codes, and I can pick different codes, code it up as much as I want. But really, kind of the key is to try and, if whatever the most common is, you've got those stored in the vendor card, or the system can kind of remember that, and so it can kind of code up all by itself. But you can kind of review that. I can say coded. And the system then, where the automation comes into place, is here's where your business rules can be for this company or vendor or certain parameters of this document. It can remember as to who was the last, who are the people that need to review this. If you can build business rules that say, if it's within certain dollar parameters, I don't need anybody to look at it, or I do need multiple people to look at it. And so you can see here, you can maybe specify multiple levels, up to 5 in this case. And you can see where it defaulted the approver. I can hit the drop down. I could change it if it's different this time. But you can also have business rules in place that if I changed it to, say, Department 600 here, this is where the automation system comes and knows that this invoice is over that particular person's approval limit. So it then automatically assigns approver 2. And since it's over his, it assigned approver 3. And so on. So the system can all have all that programmed in. It's not up for interpretation. You don't have to have your users be able to remember who does it need to go to and what are the dollar amounts for each of the people. That's all built into the system. Right. So in this case, I say send for approval. Here's where that disparate locations comes into play. So if I had multiple locations or COVID happens and we're all in working at our home, when I say send for approval, that actually is immediately in that person's queue, no matter where they're at. And so if I go in and if I log out here, and I'll log in as, say, Joe. So Joe is my approver. He could get an email that tells him something needs his attention. An email might look something like, where the automation comes into play is the automation solution. Oops. Oh, here it comes. Could send emails that might look something like this. Bart, you have invoices to approve. They have a link to their queue, or they can see a summary of everything that's in that queue with the pertinent details. They could click on a specific hyperlink and go right to that particular transaction. The other thing you can see as I logged in as Joe here, he's got his approval queue. So if I'm an approver for invoices, working from home, working from a remote office, I could come in here, I can click my approvals, and I can drill down. I can see all 4 of those invoices that are in my queue for approval. I could select from any one of them. Here's the one that I just pushed. So you can review that. And then I have access to all the things that I'm allowed to see and do here. So I can actually You can hide different fields that aren't pertinent to the approver. You can lock things down so they're read-only, so they can't change information either on purpose or by accident. And then they basically do what they do today. They're going to approve this invoice, maybe review the coding, but instead of having to somehow figure out a way to get that document back to corporate AP, they can simply click approve. It stamps their approval over there on the right-hand side where that audit trail is, where they're keeping notes. Here, let's refresh this. And then send that back to corporate AP so that they can review it one final time, and then we can push that transaction over to Microsoft Dynamics BC, and then that's good to be ready for payment, just like the purchase order invoices that went over automatically. Okay, so that's kind of I guess just a quick example of that automation where the system can extract the data, compare the data to Microsoft Dynamics BC, process things automatically, or help the user when they have to do things manually with it, for picking coding to routing it immediately to the approvers, giving them that visibility, and then sharing that information between corporate and remote locations and those types of things. The last aspect that we talked about from an automation perspective was really in the realm of spend analytics and being able to do some spend management and taking this extra time that you're going to have in providing some value to the organization. Well, systems like this, as I said, track an audit trail of all that information of where things have been, who coded it, who approved it, what kinds of things did the system do some checks and balances automatically. But then you can analyze that data with reports. And so as an example, let me pull up some reports. So reports can be in several different fashions, right? So they can be in an Excel format here. You can use things like Power BI to analyze that information as well. SQL reporting services and those types of things. But what these do, things like an accrual report or automation by what's skipping the steps and what vendors are things skipping. How long does it take to get through the payables processing? How long does it take to at each of the steps along the way? And it's like this accrual report is kind of probably one of the more popular ones. At month end, you can actually run some of these reports, and you can kind of see what this does is it's going to communicate with the financial system to pull all the invoices that are out there that haven't been pushed over yet. They're still in processing, and so I can see that visibility. I can see that data there. I have little hyperlinks that can all drill me down into the document if I wanted to see exactly where it's at and whose step it's in. But then once you pull this data back, you can have some pivot tables in Excel format anyways, like this, or that Power BI report to be able to see by account codes, maybe payables by vendor. Here's where I can see what the spend over a period of time was with a particular vendor and things like that. So that's kind of where that reporting comes into play. All right, so let's jump back over here. So really, kind of moving along, invoice automation is kind of really the aspect that we talked about today, and where you can really benefit from the capturing and the extraction and the processing and managing that all around, and then pushing the transaction over and then having it paid either yourself or through an automated payment solution as well. But really, that's kind of just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much other things that you can use in automation and leverage it for. Expense reports, here's some of the more popular types of things, adding and creating journal entries, requisitions, receiving your goods, all those kinds of things. And then we see a lot of clients that say, hey, what about HR documents? What about orders or customer service or contracts? So really, all of those kinds of documents can be expanded on as well, and really leverage a system to help you with the visibility and the control and efficiencies of those documents as well. So one of those add-on kind of solutions, another popular one is that expense report processing that you kind of saw on that screen there. And one of the things that where automation comes into play is an expense report processing. Typically, if I were to go to Summit and I've got to attach all my receipts and fill out a form and then pass that to my boss, get his approval so I can get reimbursed for all my travel expenses. Well, one of the things where you can use an automation solution to automate that is to have the solution present the form to the user automatically. They can kind of fill everything out in that form and then be able to push that electronically to their boss, whether they're in the same office or spread out around the country or wherever they may be. So as an example, so I've got this little queue over here that says create expense report, right? So if I click that, I've been given the ability to create an expense report. All right, so as you see here, this is the form, my expense report form that I would fill out. It knows what company I belong to. I can put in my purpose, traveled to client XYZ. Oops. I could actually say if it was billable to a customer, I could say who is the customer visited and was reimbursable or not. I can say my dates that I was there. I went there from the 1st to say, let's say the 3rd. And then add in pages. This allows me to submit my receipts. So as I travel, I typically take a picture of my receipts on my phone. And so when I get back in the office, they're uploaded to my OneDrive. I come in here and I just grab those receipts and say open. Allows me to upload those pages. Oops, close. So then I can see those receipts. I can put those on a different monitor. I can click the enter details. Again, this is kind of more of the form that I could fill out. So in a paper-based world, I'd have an Excel spreadsheet that I kind of fill out and I put in what was meals, what was mileage, and so on. So visually wise, from an efficiency perspective, an electronic form here, I do have that down here at the bottom. So expense type, I could say meals. Right, and you can see the other types of expenses. That kind of varies from client to client, but I can say I spent $152 there. I could add additional rows. We can even do things like mileage. So if I were to say mileage, the system can know that what the mileage rate is depending on the dates that I went. So if I said 150 miles, it automatically populates the mileage rate and then calculates that amount for me. So I fill out this form, attach my receipts, and then I say submit. And then it basically routes that to my boss, who's then going to approve it. He'll approve it. It'll send it back to AP so that I can get reimbursed and so on. Do I want to submit it? Yep, I do. And away it goes. And so it kind of logs any communication that I have with my boss to get that approved. And it does all that electronically, similar to the invoice automation solution that we showed. And this is kind of just an example of how we can kind of automate other aspects of your business. This is probably one of the more popular add-ons that we do for expense reimbursement as well. Okay, so with that, let's jump over to close back here, go back over here. So that concludes what I wanted to talk about today. Again, thanks to DynamicsCon for having us and allowing us to share with you some of our experience and how we've helped companies bring that efficiencies to their invoice processing from start to finish, all the way through the payment aspects of things, and being able to show you some real world examples there. I know we didn't have a whole lot of time today to get too deep into the product, so there's our contact information is there. If you wanted to follow up with the conference today to reach out to us, we can set up a one-on-one webinar. But otherwise, for those who did ask questions during the conference today, I can go look over at the chat capabilities and kind of read some of those questions and answer them here. If you do have questions while we're still going through the question period here, submit those through the chat function there, and we'll read those and do the best we can to answer your questions. Appreciate everybody's time. Hey, there we go. I think we're live here, folks. So welcome everybody. I appreciate your taking the time to kind of see our presentation. I'll go through some of the questions that were asked during the presentation here. A little bit of a delay, but you can see that at the beginning of the questions, at the beginning of the session, somebody put in Rich put in a nice hyperlink to our booth over in the DynamicsCon platform. So definitely visit us over there. If you got some other questions, you can chat with some of our folks, see some of a little bit more detail about the solution we talked about today. But I'll kind of go through some of the questions here that were asked, and we'll kind of. And I've got a few questions that I typically get asked, so we'll kind of maybe use a little bit of the time to do that too. So. Just kind of scrolling through here, Sheila asked, in which application is the invoice open? So I think kind of maybe saw a little bit of that as that was asked early on in the presentation. But so really the key here is that we capture the invoice into the MetaViewer application, and we extract all the data. We try to do some of the matching, as you kind of saw there, and trying to automate the process, and it routes around. And it's all controlled in our application, that MetaViewer application. But ultimately, we're eventually going to push that data over and create the transactions over in your BC platform. So initially, when I think that when that question came in, we were actually working with the invoice in MetaViewer, but then it eventually gets pushed over there. Sorry about the blurry screen there. This was a pre-recorded thing, as the one person kind of indicated there. I didn't have a whole lot of control over the recording platform, but let's go kind of scroll down here. Jackie had a question. It says, when an invoice matches the PO, is it a manual process to post the invoice, or is the invoice automatically posted? It's a good question. So when we pull in the system, the invoice, we extract the data. It then communicates with all the data that's in BC to kind of try and do that automatic matching, as you saw there in the brief demo that I did there. And then we eventually, once it's been, if it needs user interaction or those types of things, all that kind of happens, the approvals, the coding, the matching to the purchase order in this case. If that happens, and we push the transaction over and we create the transaction in BC, but it is not posted. There are some ways that we've had some clients do some automated posting when it gets over there. But really what we're trying to accomplish here is to really create that transaction over in the BC system without you having to manually key that information in. So it basically, invoice comes in, the data gets extracted, it gets matched, it pushes it over and creates that transaction. And then you're going to post those transactions like you normally would. So that's really kind of, it all flows right on through from when the vendor emails it to you all the way over, and then next thing you know, the transaction's over there ready to be posted. So that's kind of how that process works. Henrik said, I see you are using localhost in a production environment, so our customer would have their own server, or is this a SaaS hosted? Good question, good observation, I guess. Basically the system that I was using is my demo system, and so I've kind of I kind of had, we're using localhost. It's a little bit of a technical kind of a thing there, but you're right. Realistically, these are going to be, the system is going to be on a true server, and we actually, for BC, we do most of I think almost all of them, if not all, have been in our hosted facility, where we actually host the solution. Your BC environment is wherever your BC environment is, and whatever servers that we're communicating through Azure or wherever you have that located. But in a real world, you would not have localhost. It would be whatever the server is that is housing the application or housing the IIS web application interface. Sheila asked another question. Does MetaViewer support OCR capability? There's multiple questions here, so we'll just kind of maybe address them one at a time here. Yes, we do. So one of the big advantages of MetaViewer is if we can capture the invoices directly from your vendor, they created the PDF and sent it through their financial system right directly to your email box, and we pulled in, we can actually use the text that document contains. So if it was never really made paper, that invoice, it would then extract the data, and then we would just actually copy that text out. So we don't really need OCR in those types of invoices. Where the OCR comes into play is if an invoice is scanned. If it's scanned, there is no text to extract. And so in that case, it's just a picture. And that's where we use that OCR to convert that picture back into text. And then it goes into, and then we're going to kind of use that text to extract the information and do the processing in the system that we do. Next question that Sheila had was, how is it linked to the invoice and the payment? Is the metadata of the invoice transferred to the payment? So two questions there. So yes, so basically what happens is when we extract all the pertinent information of that invoice, it gets coded, it gets matched to the purchase order information, and then we push that transaction over to BC so that it can be posted for payment. But we actually then, once we hand that transaction off over there, we put it in a queue that says waiting for payment. And basically that's our system periodically talking to BC so that when you apply that payment information to that transaction, we're going to pull that back. And so we can index the document on that payment information. And then if you were searching for documents in MetaViewer, you could actually search by that payment information. So it kind of all ties together that way. Jackie had a question. We have a vendor that sends, let's see if I'm in the right order here. Yep. We have a vendor that sends one PDF with multiple invoices, each on its own page. Would the reader be able to differentiate each invoice and PO? Yes, good question. So typically what a lot of clients will do is ask the vendors when they email them to just have them a single PDF per invoice, and they can actually attach multiple PDFs to the same email, and then we'll actually pull all the different PDF invoices copies in, and then process those documents. For some vendors that either don't do that, or still send a single PDF with multiple invoices in it, we do have the ability to read the invoice and burst. They call it bursting, burst off of content. So maybe it depends on how the vendor does it, but maybe when the invoice number changes, or the it says page 1 of 1 or 1 of 2, or something like that. When that changes, we can then know that's how we burst it. So there's some intelligence that goes in there. Like I said, we do have a bursting capability to try and automate that too, so you're not having to break those apart manually. All right, I am live. Thanks, Rich. The original recorded session. So Rich just kind of made a comment there. You can view the original recording. Yep, it is on the YouTube channel. I think I saw some messages coming in on the wire earlier today about how to get to that YouTube channel. So yeah, you will be able to kind of watch this recording. I would encourage you to kind of hop over to our booth and maybe chat real quickly with one of our associates. With that, we can actually kind of set up a time where we can maybe do a little bit more involved, maybe probably a 1 hour presentation with you and your folks, and you can actually ask questions as you go through. So, this is just kind of really try to give you a taste, really focusing on, how you can do some automation to bring some efficiencies into your organization. So we'll kind of do that there. So I think that's kind of all the questions that we see there. You can see I'm kind of watching the question capability there. If you have some other questions, you can ask. I guess a lot of times I get a couple key questions that people ask me when I'm doing demos. Implementation time, how long does it take to implement? And we have a really pretty good refined process for that. We've kind of historically used to build everything from scratch for clients, and we found that so many people had really the same needs, and we actually built a best practices approach to AP, and so it's kind of a pre-built solution. So when we install the solution, and probably in the first day or so, we will get the server set up in a hosted environment. We will install the base solution. We'll test it, make sure that it's communicating with your BC system, and then kind of route some things through. And then we kind of hand it off to a project team. It's going to really then can focus more on tweaking the system for the kinds of things that you maybe need to do, or maybe and really focus a lot on training. And so in our experience, the people we're trying to train, they have day jobs. They need to do the day-to-day business as well. So what we found for the ability to really understand and comprehend the things that we're training, it works best to do a couple sessions a day. They can still do their day job. They can focus on really learning at the time when we're teaching them what they need to do with the system. And so we do about 12, 15 different sessions like that over a period of a number of weeks. And then our clients are really well equipped when they do go live. They're really on top of everything, and they really know exactly how the system works. So we seem to, all that said and done, typical implementation time frame can go probably about 3 months or so, I think, from start to finish, to put everything, to get everything set up in the environment, talking to your BC, giving you all the training, tweaking it as needed. And that really varies. Like I said, I think on a one-on-one type of conversation, we can kind of talk about the capabilities of your staff, and we can kind of push up that time frame a little bit if we think it needs to be a little bit. If you're willing to speed up the training or things like that. So there's a little bit of variability in that. Okay, we have JW has sent another question here. If a vendor sends a statement, could that system check the invoice numbers and their status in BC? At this point, we do not process statements in the system. I think there's probably some things we could maybe do there. That is not the standard functionality of the system, being able to pull off all the invoice numbers off of that statement and then checking across BC. It's an interesting concept. I think we've kind of talked about doing some of that in the past, but at the present time, it does not do that. So. Another question, obviously, is cost. It's kind of a little bit hard to do in a scenario like this. Again, if we kind of had a one-on-one session with you, we can kind of talk about it, but just kind of at a high level perspective, it kind of you're gonna, like I said, BC. Typically, since BC is hosted, most of our implementations for BC have been hosted. We do offer on-premises and from a historical perspective. But when it's a hosted, you're basically going to pay for kind of the solution as a whole. You're going to kind of pay a monthly fee, and that's the use of our infrastructure, the use of the software, and those types of things. So we can kind of work with you to kind of figure out what that monthly fee would be. I do know we have some great promotions right now from an implementation services perspective to kind of offer that implementation at a very reduced rate. So I think there's some really exciting things that we're doing there to kind of speed things up and to kind of really control your costs. So definitely talk with our folks to when you get into a demo for your organization, we can kind of look at that a little bit more specific. Another question from Sheila. Is there any validation to check if the invoice is first posted and then the payment is pushed to BC? Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, like I said, in this demo scenario, it was really hard to kind of give you really the full tour. Really just kind of trying to talk about that automation. But one of the things I think when you saw on that audit trail over there, all the checks and balances that we do, we actually do duplicate checks against BC and against our own system multiple times throughout the process, because if somebody manually keyed something into BC, we don't want to be duplicating efforts. We don't want to waste our time trying to process a secondary invoice. So it can definitely look to, by company, vendor, invoice number, those types of parameters, we're doing those duplicate checks to make sure that something isn't. If it is, we're going to flag it. We're going to kind of push it to a duplicate queue. Or if you're working with that invoice through the system, when you try to route it to the next system, that's kind of when we're going to do those duplicate checks. And then it'll pop up and allow you and tell you, hey, this matches something that's in BC or something that's already in MetaViewer. And then you can have a link to, if it's already in MetaViewer somewhere else, you'd have a link to that original document. You can kind of open them both up and compare them and making sure that there is that they are they're not truly a duplicate. All right, Darlene asks, is there an automatic apply? I'm not sure exactly what that is. I think if we kind of talked about it a little bit before about automatically posting. We do not automatically post the transactions. There is some automation in the system. I'm not sure if you what exactly all we kind of showed, but it does do some matching and or automatic coding. We have ways to automatically code an invoice based off the defaults in the vendor card, or how we've coded something with those parameters in the past, and then automatically do some of that type of stuff. Thanks, Darlene, for the follow-up here. It says, or automatic apply, or is there a manual process for the user to apply? Does it handle multi-currency transactions? So there is, from a posting perspective, it is a manual process in BC, other than the fact that you didn't have to enter all the transactional data in the system. But the posting of it in BC, that you're going to kind of handle like normal. Does it handle multi-currency transactions? Yes, we can. We'll kind of default the invoice based off of what the vendor is set up. But again, once the transaction is pushed over there, you can kind of post it for payment in We don't do any, currency, what am I looking for? Calculations, to try and translate currencies, just because that's such a real-time type of scenario, and it kind of varies from day to day. We don't do anything like that in the solution. So I think that's kind of wrapping up the questions here. I can kind of wrap things up. I appreciate all the interest. I'm glad that you guys got a chance to see a little bit of live product, as well as kind of where those efficiencies come from. Like I said, hop over that link up in the queue there, up in the chat queue. Does have some links directly to our booth, or you can just click on the sponsors and navigate to the Metaviewer booth and kind of chat with our folks over there as well. So I'm going to kind of be wrapping up. I'm kind of reaching the end of my time here. So appreciate the time. One last question there. It says, can we have another session where we can see the full integration process from Metaviewer to BC? It's way too much info at one time. Yeah, that is true. Like I said, definitely reach out to us, and we can kind of set up something one-on-one with you, and then you can actually see the whole end-to-end process. Appreciate everybody's time. I think I'm going to kind of run into the top of the hour here, so I'm going to sign off. Thanks, guys.